Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabazz Dar and I am the IT Geek. Welcome back to another AZ700 designing and implementing Microsoft Azure Network Solutions study guide. So this is just a series where myself and a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Mohammed Sajid, are going through the topics that are covered within the Microsoft AZ700 exam. We're doing a bit of theory, which is what I'm doing. We're doing some labs to help you along the way. And again, you can get links to the actual labs in GitHub in the description as well. So we are on the second part, we're on module 3 for starters, and we're on the second part of the Azure Application Gateway topic. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, we are deep within module 3 now. I'm going to say it finally at least halfway through it, and so that's design and implementing core application delivery services. So today's part 2 of the design and implement Azure Application Gateway topic. Today I'm going to talk about configuring listeners. I'm going to talk a bit about configuring HTTP settings, and then I'm going to talk about configuring transport layer security TLS, and then start to do a demo around configuring root rules. So again, all these things we're talking about configuring, you can actually follow them in the labs as well if you want. But I'm going to do a bit of theory based content around them. So let's start off by talking about configuring those listeners. So a listener is a logical entity that checks for incoming connection requests by using the port, protocol, host and IP address. When you configure the listener, you must enter values of these that match the corresponding values in the incoming request on the gateway. So there are two types of listeners. The first one being basic. So if you want all your requests, that's for any domain, to be accepted and forwarded to backend pools, choose the basic listener type. The other is multi-site. So if you want to forward your request to different backend pools based on the host header or host names, choose a multi-site listener. So Application Gateway relies on HTTP 1.1 host headers to host more than one website on the same public IP address and port. To differentiate requests on the same port, you must specify a host name that matches the incoming request. So for the version 1 SKU, requests are matched according to the order of the rules and the type of listener. If a rule with the backend listener comes first in the order, it's processed first, and it will accept any request for that port and IP combination. To avoid this, you can configure the rules with multi-site listeners first and push the rule with the basic listener to last in your list. You can choose from front-end IP addresses that you plan to associate with your listener. So listeners will be listening to incoming requests on the IP. So for the sort of protocols, you can choose between HTTP or HTTPS. If you do choose HTTP, the traffic between the client and the application gateway is unencrypted. If you choose HTTPS, if you choose that if you want TLS termination or end-to-end TLS encryption, the traffic between the client and the application gateway is encrypted, and the TLS connection will be terminated at the application gateway. If you want end-to-end TLS encryption to the backend target, you must choose HTTPS within the backend HTTP setting as well. So let's talk about configuring those HTTP settings. So Azure Application Gateway uses gateway managed cookies for maintaining user sessions. When a user sends the first request to Application Gateway, it sets an affinity cookie in the response with a hash value which contains the session details. So that means that the subsequent requests carrying the affinity cookie will be routed to the same backend server for maintaining stickiness. With this topic of connection draining, this helps you with your HTTP settings. This helps you gracefully remove backend pool members during planned service updates. It applies to backend instances that are explicitly removed from the backend pool during scaling of backend instances. You can apply this setting to all members of the backend pool by enabling connection draining on the backend settings. This will ensure that all deregistered instances of that backend pool continue to maintain existing connections, and sever ongoing requests for configurable sort of timeouts, and don't receive any new requests or connections. So from a protocol perspective, the HTTP setting supports both the HTTP and the HTTPS setting, as we mentioned. From a port perspective, this setting specifies the port where the backend servers listen to traffic from the application gateway, and you can configure ports ranging from 1 to 65,535. If you select HTTPS as the backend protocol, the application gateway requires a trusted root certificate to trust the backend pool for that end-to-end SSL. By default, the use well-known CA certificate option is set to no, so it's the default setting. If you plan to use self-signed certificates or a certificate signed by an internal CA, then you must provide application gateway the matching public certificate that the backend pool will be using. This certificate must be uploaded directly to the application gateway in .cer format. So let's move on to configuring transport layer security, TLS, before we get into the demo. So you can use Azure Application Gateway to centralize TLS and SSL certificate management and reduce encryption and de-encryption overhead from a backend server farm. This centralized TLS handling also lets you specify a central TLS policy, and that's suited to that which needs to be suited to your organizational security requirements. What this will do is it'll help to meet compliance requirements as well as security guidelines and recommended best practices. The application gateway offers several predefined security policies, and you can configure your gateway with any of these policies to get the appropriate level of security. If a TLS policy needs to be configured for your requirements, you can actually create custom TLS policies as well. With a custom TLS policy, you have complete control over the minimal TLS protocol version to support, as well as supported cipher suites and their priority order. So a lot more customizability there if you use a custom profile or policy. Finally, we just touched on the cipher suites. Application Gateway supports cipher suites from which you can choose your custom policy. The ordering of the cipher suites determines the priority order during TLS negotiation. So I'm going to hand over to Mohammed Sajid now to do the demo. And as I mentioned, today's demo is on configuring routing rules. So I will hand over to you, Saj.
Thank you, Shabazz. Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this quick demo, we're going to take a look at creating rules for your application gateway. So navigate to your load balancers, application gateway, select your application gateway, and under settings you have rules. Just above rules, you have listeners, and you need to have created a listener before you're creating a rule. So if you look at a listener, what a listener does is it listens for incoming traffic for what you define within your listener name, port, protocol. So if you look here for a quick definition or a quick explanation, a listener is a logical entity that checks for incoming connection request by using the port, protocol, host, and IP address. So if we create a new one quickly, select add listener, give it a name, listener 02 in this demo, or 03. And IP public, protocol, HTTP or HTTPS. Now, if you're using HTTPS, you will need to upload a certificate or define a key vault, which we don't have configured at this moment in time. So 80, you can have port 80, or you can have a custom port. So here we've created 8080, you can have 9000 as an example. Listen type is basic or multi-site. So basic is if you have a single application or a single website in your backend. Multi-site is if you have multiple applications or multiple websites in your backend that you want to target. You can enable header page URL. It's disabled by default. So if you select yes, it gives you bad gateway 502 for pin 403. So once you're happy with your configuration for your listener, select add, and it'll create a listener for you. Whilst it's doing that, navigate to rules and select create a routing rule. Again, give it a name. So application gateway rule, if I can even spell, or two, and then priority. So if you look at the information that says Rule priority defines the order in which rules are processed between 1 and 20,000. 1 represents the highest priority. So this rule was created 100. We'll create this 110. And we've created our listeners. So we'll have 2 of them, 80 and listener, or 3. So select 8080. And your backend targets. So again, backend pool. Backend target is our backend pool. Backend settings we've configured before. If you're following along, we've created some of this in previous demos. And path-based rules, so you can target a specific path in your application or your website you deploy. So we're leaving that as default. And select add. So you can have backend pool or redirection. Again, we're leaving that as backend pool. We're not redirecting to a different location in the backend or a different target in the backend. Select add and then create a new rule for you. Thank you for watching. Back to you, Shabazz.
Thank you, Saj. Another great demo, this time on Application Gateway routing rules. So that's the end of this subtopic of Azure Application Gateway. We've covered it in two sort of episodes, and there's been some really interesting demos as well from Mohammed Sajid. The next 2 episodes, again, this is a 2-part topic. We're going to be talking about Azure Front Door, and we'll finish off this module by talking about Azure Traffic Manager. So again, thank you everybody for their support. Thank you for watching. Keep with the likes, keep with the comments, keep giving us feedback, and keep subscribing. So yeah, thank you everybody. Until next time, goodbye.